Hello YouTubers, and welcome back again to part 2 of my DIY analog synthesizer basics video. Now today I'm going to try and tackle as best as I can and as simple as I can this part of circuitry here, which is called an exponential converter. So basically what that will do is give you 1 volt per each musical octave. So say for instance we're tuning by the key of C. C0 can be say 0 volts, 1 volt would be C2 and going upwards, and say we had a starting frequency of C1 was 16 point whatever volts, C2 would be 32, or sorry, C1 would be about 32 hertz, C3 would be about 65, C4 130, and C5 261, 523 on 7 volts and upwards. So basically each linear voltage increase will give you a exponential frequency.
Welcome everybody to an interview. This is Marshall. How you doing? I hope you've had a great week. I am here today joined by Adamski A. How you doing, man? I should probably unmute you, huh?
Go.
There we go. How's it going, Adam?
Yeah, all good, thanks. Yeah, good to be here, man.
Yeah,
good to be here. I'm honored.
Oh, this is exciting for me, man. So Adamski has a DIY synth channel, as you just saw. We've kind of played a little bit of preview of one of his tutorial videos, going through his analog synthesizer project, which he's been building for how long have you been working on this?
For about maybe just over 2 years now, kind of on and off, but yeah, about 2 years.
Okay, sweet. So yeah, so I asked Adam if he'd like to come on the show and we could chat about him and his project, and so here he is. So thank you very much for coming on, Adam.
Thank you.
And if you guys are interested, he does have a YouTube channel. I will put a link in the description to that, and you can also see it here on your screen at the bottom. So let's just kind of start with some basic background from you. So you're obviously a fan of electronic music. So I'm just curious how you got into electronic music.
Yeah, well, I suppose it kind of started from childhood, really, listening to early 80s synth pop and, you know, the soul and funk things, you know, listening to people like Art of Noise, Tears for Fears, you know, Talk. And there was a guy called, I don't know if you remember, there was a guy called Paul Hardcastle. He did a track called 19. And it was quite funny because, you know, the way that I wasn't aware at the time the track was actually electronically produced, but it was fascinating hearing how the sampler was used. Well, I later found out it was the sampler, but it was really interesting hearing how that was used, and, you know, just hearing the different synthesizer tracks that he used to produce. And he one of his famous ones, it kind of still sticks in my head, was he wrote the theme tune for a track here in the UK which was called Top of the Pops back then, which I don't think no longer runs. So yeah, so it was always listening to kind of electronic synthesizer music, or hearing the synthesizer sounds, which really fascinated me. You know, it was something beyond you know, the normal acoustic sounds. It really stuck in my head, and I always kind of got fascinated by that. And then, you know, the acid house scene came along, and the early techno stuff, and that again grabbed my attention before I started, you know, sort of meeting different people at the time who were interested. You know, there wasn't a lot of us around, but there was a few people who I'd know who was pretty much, yeah, getting into the same kind of music. Used to kick about with them, and then we used to sort of, you know, get into the rave scene, and then, you know, go to the raves, and then I got into actual DJing. Pirate radio DJing for maybe over between 12 to 15 years on a few different stations. And yeah, and just, you know, I had a huge record collection. All my money, wages spent on vinyl, standard.
Yeah.
You know.
Yep.
Yeah.
So you were telling me a story about using mini discs.
Yeah.
Tell us about that real quick again.
Yeah,
that was pretty wild.
I used to sort of, I mean, mini discs never really kicked off big, but I used mini discs as a medium for recording. I used to always record my mixes. I just used to, you know, religiously go on my decks maybe a few times a week and just actually make a whole mixed mini disc. I like the whole mini disc concept because you could just erase and record over it like a tape, but it was digital, you know?
And this was before MP3s, right? Or was
it was kind of around the same time where MP3s were kind of, yeah,
they
MP3s and CDs. Just MP3s, I think, was just kind of creeping in.
Okay. But the CDs were there, but then there was these mini discs. Were they higher density, or were they about the same?
Well, they were about double. What you could do if you had the mini discs and you played them in stereo, you had about 74 minutes, the same as a normal CD.
Right.
And if you recorded in mono, you had double that time. So I used to make a point of having a mix in mono. So
you'd have a super long,
right? Super long mix, super mix.
That's crazy. So utilizing a medium like that and altering it slightly to get additional time that's something I hear people talk about, like doing some old school type recording on even old multi-track recorders and ways you can get around certain limitations. So that's pretty wild that you were using that. I think that's really cool, actually. So and you and I have something in common. Like when I was a kid, I was the same. I would pick out these electronic sounds in some of the songs of the day, and I was always fascinated by that and wondered how they were made and what that was. Obviously, growing up, figured out, oh, it's synthesizers. Cool. So then now I have all these synthesizers. So speaking of synths, when did you start buying synthesizers?
Well, I started buying my first synthesizer. I bought, I think it was in about, I can't remember precisely when, probably early 2000s, and it was an Alpha Juno 2. The kind of story behind that was when me and my friends, we'd kind of gone through the DJ and we was buying we was very much into the drum and bass at the time. The drum and bass that was coming out, and I remember somebody mentioning the Hoover sound, and we thought like that if we get that Juno, we can do any of those Hoover sounds.
Is this one
wasn't
here?
Quite the case. Yeah, there we go. And yeah, so
that was your first synth?
That was my first synthesizer.
Do you remember how much did it cost you? Do you remember?
I think it was about 300 UK pounds at the time, between 250 and 300 UK pounds.
Okay.
And it was a kind of like me and a friend of mine. We went halves on it at the time. So, and when he kind of disbanded and wasn't really interested, he pretty much didn't care, and I ended up owning it.
Inheriting it. There you go.
Yeah.
Sweet.
Yeah, all the way from sunny Brighton in the UK. Hello, Marcus Fuller. Who knows where that is?
Oh, that's cool. So that was your first synth. So you were DJing, and then what made you decide to? I assume you were DJing first, or did you have the synth first, or how?
No,
how
I was. I was DJing first, and then there was a guy who used to listen to my radio show. Called Owen Palmer. He's an electronic engineer, also known as Hatrix. He's an electronic dance music engineer. He wasn't quite at the time, but he was very heavily into music production. He called me up one day on one of my shows, and he sent me a mixtape of his tracks and asked me if I wanted to come down to his studio. So I went down to his studio and kind of saw what he was doing, and that kind of really inspired me to get into it. And then I kind of thought, oh, okay. And started, collecting a few more synths. Like I think one of the first Rompler type synths I had was the Korg M1,
right.
Full-size M1 with a few cards. And I remember seeing them on eBay, seeing the cards, the actual expansion cards on eBay, and thinking, wow, that's a lot of money just for a few samples. So yeah.
So the Korg M1 is one of those that they were like everywhere.
Yeah.
For a long time. I think it's one of the, if not the most sold synthesizers ever, right?
Yeah.
This was a big deal because it was multi-timbral versus the D50, right? So people were actually ditching a lot of their hardware synths and using M1s. Is what there's a story on ADSR where the guys over there who used to work for Roland, I think. They talk about how some of these bands were getting rid of their vintage analog gear and just picking up M1s and doing their productions with M1s, which seems pretty crazy.
That was, yeah. When you think back now in hindsight, yeah, that's why a lot of, I hear lots of people who tell stories about, I got this Jupiter 8 for about £200 back in the day, or dollars, or whatever it was.
Right.
And people, because of machines like the M1, the JD800, the D50, they pretty much, DX7 kind of killed analog. It became old hat. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, people were tired of them, and they were selling them for bargain basement prices. Mm-hmm. And man, I bet you they wish they didn't do that now. But the M1 is an amazing synthesizer. I love the way it sounds. I'm actually been utilizing it lately on some tracks I've been working on. But so you started accumulating some of these things because you met a producer friend who kind of showed you some things, and you started buying synths and producing music, right?
I definitely did. And another one of my inspirations, there was a guy in the UK, a producer under the name of Busy B, who used to run a label, or still does run a label, called Brain Records. And I used to go down to his studio. I didn't know it was a studio at the time, so I used to go down to his. He used to have a record shop, so we used to go down to his to buy records. And in that time, I sort of used to see his studio. And I used to have quite a few big names in the garage scene, and in the jungle, which was jungle and drum and bass scene. And I used to kind of like be very curious about all the equipment that he used to have in his studio, and think, how can I get my hands on some of that? And what is everything that you need to produce a track? Do you know what I mean?
Right.
So I didn't quite actually know.
It was jungle the genre that you started producing in?
It kind of was and wasn't. At the time, about 1991, when things kind of progressed started turning in from acid house into techno, and then we had the UK hardcore. I mean, commercial examples I can give is tracks like The Prodigy, Out of Space.
Gotcha. I love that song.
Things down that line, it was the very much heavy sort of breakbeat influenced music, which I liked. Mm-hmm. So it was that which was the music I was still producing or trying or having a go at writing. I mean, it was dying out. It was evolving at the time, but I was still heavily into the sound before, because I just loved the detail. Mm-hmm. Tracks I listened to back then, they had so much detail in them, and there's so many little things that you could pick out that tracks which were being made in the kind of late 90s. Early 2000s, it was all dying out, and it was becoming throwaway music to me. Right. And there wasn't so many timeless classics which I could say, do you know what, I can listen to that again and again, and I'll notice something different. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. No, I know exactly what you mean, and I have an affinity for some early to mid 90s style techno and trance. It's kind of my shtick. So, and I remember listening to a lot of breakbeats and stuff back in the early 2000s that were probably older as well. So, and I can hear some of the influence in some of the music that I've heard from that you have. And if you guys are interested, I'll put links to Beatport links and SoundCloud links for Adamski's music, so check it out. But yeah, that's really cool too. So, do you have a favorite synthesizer?
Do I have a favorite synthesizer? No, I don't have a favorite synthesizer. I probably have a top 3 synthesizers, if we say, but I would kind of split them into categories, because I think it would be unfair to put analog versus, and digital in the same category. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I mean, from some of I could definitely say some of my favorite ones were ones like the Roland JD990, for sure, which is kind of slightly upgraded version of the JD800, which I used to own, the JD800. Again, the Korg M1, and one of the early VAs, which they came out in the early 2000s. If you don't remember, the VA synthesizers was the Novation Nova, which I still own. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I mean, I owned quite a few back then, things like the AN1X, which you have. Yep. The mighty AN1X.
The AN1X is pretty wild. It's it's a really underrated synth, and you can pick one of those up for under $500, I think, usually. So and the JD800, I've got one of those. Those were plagued by some weird glue issues with the key bed, I think.
Yeah, I think I sold mine before that actually happened to my one. So
Good. 'Cause
I'm sure it
people,
was somebody else's problem.
yes.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
yeah, so like I said, synthesizers, like I really liked the sounds of the old Roland SH series. There was to me really nice sounding mono synths. I mean, I kind of, although like I said, my first synthesizer was the Juno 2. I never the sound never quite glued in my head, and I never kind of really appreciated it as much as I should have. But it kind of got to a point, where I started hearing other synthesizers or going to other studios and hearing other people's gear and things that stuck in my head. Like the first time I actually heard a real mini Moog.
Right.
It was like, ow.
Yeah. I had a situation where when I first started making music, it was all on the computer. So I was using a MIDI tracker that had a built-in virtual analog synthesizer. You could import PCMs into it and do some sequencing. And I didn't realize like how influential the Mini Moog actually was. Like I didn't know that was one of the if not the first kind of affordable small style synthesizer. Because before that they were these big modular things, right? So and it's in so much stuff, it's insane. The Mini Moog is definitely a special synthesizer, I think.
Without a doubt. And so like I said, there was there's quite a few mono synths there's quite a lot of mono synths which I just love the sound of and love the design and layout. But I never had a particular favorite one.
Yeah, you just love synths, man, like us. Like we're synth nerds.
I love them all.
Right. Some more than others, okay? But yeah, definitely anything that's got a couple oscillators and some filters and things like that, like I'm down with. So obviously you got a love for synthesizers, got a love for electronic music. When did you decide I want to try and make a synthesizer?
I think it was just over 2 years ago, just over 2 years ago, in about 2015, very late 2015, and I was talking to the engineer friend of mine, and I kind of said it to him as a kind of flippant comment. I'm going to have a go at building my own synthesizer, and he kind of said, yeah, you can, but then you're kind of locked into having one thing, which I said to myself, I didn't mind. And he advised me to go the modular route. And he said, if you buy modular stuff, at least you can buy your modules, you can chop and change your models, resell your module, experiment with different, combining different oscillators of a different synthesizer sound and then combine that with a different filter and a VCA, etc.
Right.
Modular was, the whole modular thing was quite new to me. I hadn't really had a clue about it all.
Which does make sense. That is a good way to kind of build something unique without having to get very granular into the circuit design, etc.
Yeah.
Which you decided to go that route, right?
Yeah. I think it's one of the things in my nature. As a child, I was always the one to open up people's games machines and have a look inside. I mean, I didn't know what I was doing with it, but I'd always kind of open things up and have a look inside and try and do something to 9 times out of 10 destroy it.
Destroy it. I was the same way. My parents used to buy me stuff. I'd have it torn apart, and then I couldn't put it back together usually. So that's pretty funny.
Yeah. I mean, I looked at. I started seriously watching YouTube probably only just under 2.5 years ago. I mean, I didn't actually realise there was actually, as far as synthesizers and electronic music was concerned, I didn't actually realise there was such a big resource and such a big, community for it.
Yeah.
Which I think is absolutely great, and it's,
It's one of the best things about YouTube is you can get on there and learn all kinds of stuff. And including how to build synthesizers, as from Adam's channel. So when you started, you didn't have any experience with this type of thing, right? You were as green as can be. So
shall we say?
So in starting this, you had some prototypes, and what was your first circuit that you built?
The first circuit I built was a circuit which was designed by a guy. Well, I don't know if it's actually exclusively his design, but there was a guy called Pete McBennett who made a LDR. It's called the LDR synth. So it's a light dependent resistor, which is actually the filter control, not the oscillator tuning control, but it controls the filter. And I saw him do that on his channel. And he did share the circuit diagram, and I thought that actually looks quite simple. So I gave it a small shot. I tried it. I didn't have a clue what all the parts were. Kept on asking a few questions, got a few answers, and it was one of these things that didn't actually go very well, and it kind of failed. So yeah.
Did you try it? Did you try it again, or did you just kind of stop with that?
I stopped with that idea, and the next idea, just to make things easier for myself, I decided to try and have a go at a Jupiter 8 VCO.
Okay.
Now, so there was a guy called, he goes by the name of Tier Grinder. He actually built a 4-voice Jupiter 8 clone. It's pretty much, like for like clone of the Jupiter 8, except for it has 4 voices. And he shared a post of how, the oscillator, the basic oscillator and exponential converter, which you see in the first video that I showed, that was the diagram or a schematic for it. He displays it on his channel, and I thought, wow, somebody can actually build one of these, crazy electronic sound generator machines, which, so sought after, quite iconic classic. Somebody's actually brought one back to life for him,
Yeah, because if you look on eBay, or if you're able to locate a Jupiter 8, they're like $9,000-$10,000 US. I'm not sure British pounds wise, but they're a lot of money now.
Yeah.
So going through and just making one seems pretty crazy. So
yeah.
So that was your next project?
So that was my next project, and again, it was a failure project because I wasn't even aware of how a keyboard CV is needed to trigger the circuit. I kind of thought if I put all the components together, but I'll just buy some components, put them together on a board, and then see how they work out, and try and get them powered up. And again, it was a failure, but it kind of learnt me that do my research properly.
Right.
And but at the same time, it kind of I learnt a lot from it because I bumped into a site called the Muff Wiggler, and it's one of these synth DIY sites, and there's lots of threads on there on certain subjects, and people answered lots of questions, and there's a lot of questions that I needed answering, and I was picking up the answers, and having a look at other synthesizer designs. And I kind of found there was a few common traits with things like the oscillators, the way the oscillators were saw core, we call saw core oscillator. So we start off with a basic circuit which gives us a saw core. So the sawtooth is the first oscillator that you have, and then you wave shape from that sawtooth. Mm-hmm. So you go on to make a triangle wave, and then you make a pulse square wave, and then a sine wave. Normally people take a sine wave from a triangle wave. Right. And it was actually finding out all those little things and constantly looking at diagrams, not consciously, doing it or religiously doing it as I really wanted to, but it was just kind of, every so often just looking at diagrams and thinking, well, that looks like that one, and this one looks similar to this one.
Right.
So there must be some kind of common way that oscillators are built, and yeah.
Mm-hmm. And by going through this process, you're learning more and more. Mm. And so when did you have the inspiration for the current? Or is this still it? Is this still part of what you've been working on?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it basically what happened was I went back to the basic oscillator, which I tried to build in the first place, and I did an accidental experiment because me, I kind of looked at diagrams. I thought, well, how can I get this from what I've already got now? Mm-hmm. So I put on the component, managed to produce a saw oscillator, and then my other challenge where I thought, well, how can I actually voltage control this oscillator and have it so I can actually play it musically? And I kind of went back to this is why I went back to the Jupiter 8 project and thought, well, I've actually already had a go at trying to build an exponential converter that didn't work. and I built the exponential converter, by which time I did have a CV, a CV and gate source, and I tried the CV, and unbeknown to me, it seemed to work. It was very out of tune and needed tweaking here and there, but it was one of these things that I kind of thought, well, maybe if I swap this component and maybe change this value and change this to a different, I was learning lots of different things, like even small things like how using a certain material of a capacitor will be more reliable than another one, tolerances and temperature drift and things like that. It was all rushing into me. It was all getting interesting to me.
So it started clicking, and you were figuring out ways to basically modify some of these designs to get them to do what you needed them to do.
Yeah,
that's wild. And you've got no background in this area, right?
No, like I said, I'm not. I'm no electronics engineer. Never intended to be. I'm still not an electronics engineer. I'm just a passionate synth head, shall we say?
Yeah, I mean, I find it absolutely fascinating, and it gives me inspiration as somebody who's got a passing interest in some of this stuff and have for a long time. That maybe it's something I can do after all.
Well, it's like I said, one of the main points about my channel is not so much look what I've done. It's more the case of this is what I've done. It doesn't matter how you start. And you could do this too. If you're willing to give it a go, you could do this too. So hence why I posted my first video, and I didn't have the intention of actually doing a serious YouTube. I mean, I wouldn't call my channel serious, but I didn't have the intention of kind of doing a whole tutorial series on all the different types of circuits that I bought in the progression thing. I kind of posted one vid. I had a few looks on it, a few likes on it, and then people kind of asked a few questions and sort of said, are you going to do any more to it? At which the time I was actually trying to do things like I was getting into building the Steiner Parker, my first Steiner Parker filter clone circuit. And it was kind of a case that I just kind of thought, well, if I can do this, why not just share your ideas with other people? But it was also kind of supposed to be a kind of community based or community aimed based thing where I'll share my ideas. People come back to me, the viewers, people who view it will share their ideas, or if I've got questions, I could ask them. There's quite a few a few subscribers who really share who are quite knowledgeable, and they've shared some quite vital information with me, on doing things a certain way, or I've tried something and I've come into a problem. I've kind of said, well, how can I get out of this one? I've asked a question and they've came back with an answer, and now it's starting to, it makes sense to me.
Right. So with the YouTube channel doing the tutorials, you're giving feedback to people like me who have no idea what I would be doing, and I think your channel is a great place to get some information on how these circuits come together and the components utilized and how to do it. But then you're also getting feedback from other people who have a lot of knowledge in the area as well to help out, right?
Yeah. Yeah, like I said, there's lots of people from different levels who are, the subscribers now. There's people there who kind of started off pretty much from scratch like me, who ask questions, and I'm always willing to help. And if I don't know the answer, I'll try and refer them to someone else who does.
Right, yeah. So let's check out a little bit of this VCF, the Steiner Parker VCF. We've got a little video here. I'll play a little bit of this so you guys can hear. Oh, I love it. Look at all them wires, man. Holy cow.
The spaghetti factory in full effect.
Yeah, but it looks well organized. It's got a good sound.
Do you know one of the things about the whole board is that I can actually, because I built it from scratch, I know where every single component is, and I know exactly what every component does. So if I ever run into a problem, I can go,
hello,
bang, it's you, or bang, it's you.
Sorry, my YouTube's going crazy.
That's okay.
Yeah, so being that you designed that whole thing, you know where everything's at.
Yeah.
You can make sense of all that. I look at that and go, Wow. How long did it take to get that to that point?
On and off, I would probably about 2 years, probably about, or just under kind of 2 years. I mean, it wasn't 2 years solid. It was kind of, I did a bit and then kind of, left it and walked away from it, which was good because then I came, had a think about things and thought, oh, actually, I checked out lots of other synth videos and thought, I wonder if I could incorporate that idea. It never started off with, okay, this is the synth that I want to build.
Right.
From oscillator to filter to VCA, and I want to have this modulation, that modulation, these envelopes, etc., etc. It was kind of like I built it as I went along, as I was, becoming more confident and successful at getting working circuits, and was thinking, what can I add to it? It was keeping it a very low parts count, but trying very small little things and little tiny little twists which are not quite conventional you see on synthesizers, for instance, where I tried something with FM. So with a lot of analog synthesizers that I've seen, mono synthesizers in particular, with the FM they'll maybe have one or two oscillators. One oscillator one will frequency modulate oscillator two, or we'll just do things like frequency modulate the filter or things like that. So
right.
I kind of had the idea to myself, because I owned things like a DX7, which were obviously FM, and I kind of understood how the operators and how the algorithms worked. I kind of thought to myself, well, I've got 3 oscillators here. How can I actually make some kind of analog algorithm, put them all together in a block in some kind of chain to all frequency modulate each other.
Right.
But then there was another thing, which a small detail, which I picked up on with FM, was particularly the Yamaha DX range. A lot of these synthesizers, they had a feedback loop. And one of the last operator, they had a feedback loop. And I thought, can I incorporate that in a analog synthesizer? So I tried it. Again, I tried it, and it worked. Yeah. Not quite the same, but it worked. So that was a thing I tried. So I built, did small circuit modifications to put to incorporate the FM.
What? I'm just blown away. So like you're just thinking of stuff like to add, like what can I do and how can I do it, and then you're just putting and just doing it. Yeah, that's incredible.
Pretty much, it's all trial and error and experimentation, pretty much.
Have you ever had anything that you started and you were like, maybe that's not going to work in here?
Yeah, I mean, one of my what's the word? I can't think of the word. One of my challenges that I had was actually keeping the oscillators in tune, the exponential converters, because you have something which is called a current mirror, where basically there's 2 back-to-back transistors, and the idea is that you can either do this 2 ways. You can either have a temperature compensating resistor. So as the temperature increases, the room temperature increases, or the ambient temperature increases, the idea is that both the transistors, the values, will drift, but they'll be still closely matched together. Or you can do it another way by actually making your own heater. So basically, you have a chip which is called a transistor array, and you heat that transistor array and keep it at a steady temperature. So you've got quite a rock solid. What's the word? I can't think of it. Yeah. So basically, your tuning is rock solid.
Right.
I mean, there's a few synthesizers that you used to use it. There was one called Remote Prodigy, for instance. I think it uses a heated transistor array. I might not be 100% sure on that. And also, I know the Arduino Midi uses a transistor heater method to control the temperature. That's why some of them, they say, oh, you must turn on the synth for at least 10 minutes before the tuning becomes stable.
Right, to let them warm up.
Yeah, that's right, because it's all, all the components need a time to warm up, and some may need longer, but it's the ones that have the heated transistor array. They tend to be able to reach temperature quicker and tend to be more stable.
And there's a prodigy for anyone who's interested in what that looks like. And that is one of the things with analog. A lot of times they need a warm-up period, and that's why, so that they can get stable tuning, right?
Yeah. So it was something I discovered along the lines, and I didn't think it was going to be as big a challenge as it was, because I remember reading some articles about, you know, how that was one big thing for like Bob Moog back in the day, is to be able to you know, tuning stability. One of the things about the early mini Moogs was how, you know, it was very, if you took it on stage, took it into a hot room, it, you know, it
would go out
drifted
of tune.
badly.
Right.
Yeah. You know,
And that's one of the reasons why when virtual analog started becoming a thing, I think there was a big draw to that, because you didn't have those tuning issues, right?
No, that's right. That's right. It was pretty much, you know, everything was digital, everything was rock solid. But then you kind of, I think you lost. I know people are probably going to throw sticks at me for saying this. I think you lost a bit of the fatness.
Right.
You know, that those small drifts. It's like I've had this kind of challenge to myself recently where I've tried to put my synth against VSTs, and I think to myself, well, I've got 2 oscillators on the VST and I've got 2 oscillators on my synthesizer. Why does my synthesizer sound more live? It's because of the inaccuracies and the imperfections.
Right. Yep. It's not. There's randomness in the sound, basically, when it's created with these analog components versus a digital waveform, right? Yeah. The digital waveforms can be perfect. So, and I guess kind of what we're seeing now is the ability to try and add some of that randomness back in through the software. I don't know if there's any plugins that do that, but definitely on some of like the Dave Smith stuff, they've got like a slop control that you can add some of that randomness back in.
Yeah, there is a few. I mean, there is a few sort of VST synthesizers. Like I think there's one called the OPX, which is a emulation of the Oberheim OBX, which has a kind of tuning. You can actually, is one if you click on the button and you flip the back view, you can do all these little tuning things or little modifications. And also one called by Synapse Audio called the Legend, and you flip it around and you can actually get the oscillators to drift, and you can set that drift amount. Okay. So you get that slight phase in, you know, that, like you say, that randomness. Because if you look at a waveform, you record the whole waveform, say for 2 minutes on the digital compared to an analog, you can see how the analog is never quite every cycle of that saw wave or square or whatever shape it is never quite exactly the same.
Right. And that's it. That's where the magic happens, I think.
Yeah. One of the reasons why the magic happens.
Right.
But yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you're using electricity to control sound, or to generate and control these sounds, versus the software stuff, which is programmed, basically. Yeah, so I don't know. And to me, it's all good. Either one's they both have their places, I think, for sure. The analog has a certain sound and feel. The virtual analog stuff has its own sound and feel as well. So if you're looking for something that is more kind of sterile, I guess, sounding, then you can do that. But they're getting better and better, and I think maybe one day they'll be able to emulate the analog stuff pretty darn well.
I agree with you. Yeah. It's really, you know, there's some really, really, really nice and very interesting sounding VST plugins, which, you know, if you did a blind test, you'd probably get it wrong.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So you'd say, that's it's not, it's digital. Wow. Okay.
Well, and one of the things too is, like, with analog, and this is something that I've talked about on my channel before, because I do some comparison videos and stuff here and there with some other synthesizers, is that especially with analog, you can get like my Mini Moog here probably sounds different from somebody else's Mini Moog, right? And it's because it's analog. So when you compare these synthesizers, sometimes it's going to be dependent on, well, what does yours sound like, right? And which one did they use to produce this other synthesizer? Like with the Behringer, for example, the Behringer D, whatever one they used, you know what I mean? That's what it's going to sound like. Or even some of the Roland analog circuit behavior stuff, which is pretty cool that they're able to. They basically emulate or recreate the components in the software. So as far as I understand it, that's kind of how they're recreating with some of the boutiques and the System 8 with the plug outs and stuff. But yeah, it's going to depend on what what base model did they use to design that? That's kind of what it's going to sound like, right?
That's right. That's quite interesting. Yeah, because that was one of the things that I discovered, that there's no two. If somebody says, oh yeah, well that doesn't sound like that doesn't sound like a SH-101, or that doesn't sound. There's no two SH-101s or 303s unless they were had a complete twinned life. A lifespan, they did exactly the same things, were turned on exactly the same time, turned off exactly the same time, played for the same amount of time. That you're never going to sound quite the same.
Right. So that's one of the things too. So it's a tough area when you try and go in and try and recreate those digitally, I think. So, but I did have a question for you. With your circuits and stuff that you've been building, what has been the biggest challenge for you? Has it been the tuning?
I think the biggest challenge for me at the moment is making everything work together. Everything work together and keeping things on a low parts count, because my idea was to try and prototype this all the circuits first of all. Mm-hmm. Before sort of going on to the next level of trying to create the schematics in the software, and then move on to maybe trying to design PCBs. But like I said, trying things like the oscillator stability, keeping things low noise as well, because one of the things I kind of discovered is analog noise,
right,
at the end of the audio chain, and it was kind of one of these things I kind of not so much I want things to be, but I try and make things as best as I can. If you're going to do something, try and do a really good job at it. That's what I say, or don't bother.
Yeah, no, I agree. That's a great work ethic for that. So you were having, you've run into some issues where you've got some noise that's being generated by the components is picked up through the outputs. Is that? And that's been an issue.
That has been one of the issues, and one of the things I learned was that actually the way I'm actually doing my circuits at the moment is one of the reasons probably why I'm getting a lot of the noise is by using breadboards, because I use breadboards. The reason why I started using breadboards is the ability to be able to pull the component out within, rather than waiting for a soldering iron to heat up and then to desolder. Not that I can't really solder anyway, so it was just a quick way to experiment. It's plug and play pretty much, like building Lego. You just pick it up, pull it out, get on with. Okay, new idea in your head, boom, 5 minutes, it's done.
Right.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, or if this isn't working, just yank all the wires out and redo it, right?
Yeah,
and you're good.
Pretty much.
When I was in high school, I took a computer electronics class, and we actually did some basic circuit design like that. We weren't doing, obviously, sound generating things, but we were doing like displays, like 10-digit displays, and doing countdowns and stuff like that. And we used breadboards. So I know about those, and yeah, they're a nice way to get your idea implemented and see if it works.
Yeah.
So, are you saying that you think that may be part of the reason why you've seen some of the noise issues?
Yeah, I mean, it was one of the reasons, but there was lots of other things that I discovered along the way by, asking questions in forums or seeing or Googling the question and then finding the answer on different forums. Like, again, the Muff Wiggler. Mm-hmm. There's also a Facebook Synth DIY, which is a very, very good resource. There's very knowledgeable people there. But actually finding out things like the types of op-amp, operational amplifier chips that you use can be a contributing factor. Some are more low noise than others, or some are, transistors. Each different components. The difference between a metal film resistor, mm-hmm. which is, a very more precision 1% tolerance component, versus the sort of the old school brown, they called carbon resistors, which are kind of 5%. Knowing that there's noise within those components, simple components as well. So it's trying to redo everything and try and perfect things to make it as low noise as possible and optimize what I'm using. I started off using some very, very basic components. As I start to grow and my knowledge seems to grow, I started upgrading everything. And
right.
Yeah.
So, and then obviously I would assume anyways, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I would imagine that you start adding some of these things into the chain and you get more and more noise
Yeah,
at the end.
pretty much.
And essentially, I would also think that a higher quality components are going to produce the lowest noise. Is that accurate?
Yeah, again, it's I wouldn't say it's 100% accurate, but it's quite subjective. It's one of these things because there's compatibility issues. It's a bit like, okay, well, if you're going to unplug this component and then think just by putting this one in is going to solve all your problems, it's not always the case.
Right.
As I found out, But again, it's one of these things. It's as you start to pick up, as I've picked up knowledge, more and more knowledge, I've kind of learnt that there's lots of different factors, reasons why, you have things like noise, and ultimately. I also sort of looked into that. Apparently, the noise, the actual noise within analog synthesizers is actually just part of the nature of having analog circuits. Mm-hmm. So you're never going to be able to 100% get rid of it, and things like oscillator noise bleed and stuff like that.
Right.
So yeah.
And so, you see some of that. Like I work in the AV industry as my real job, and we see some of that. We even get. You can run into issues where you get noise bleed from other things just because they're right next to each other, So, and this is even more so because you're designing all these circuits right next to each other with all the components right there. So, yeah, I could definitely see that as being a challenge. I wanted to talk about the your MIDI to CV implementation. I think this is really cool. I'm gonna play just a little bit of your video on this. Real quick. So this is an Arduino board that you're using, right?
Yeah.
And then here comes your awesome sequence. I love this this riff that you wrote for this too. So this is controlling your synthesizer via MIDI, right. MIDI to CV.
That's right. Yeah. So we got MIDI CV gates, MIDI CV pitch CV, and a gate, and this particular circuit has velocity and pitch bend as well. So the first one is sort of the pitch bend information.
Mm-hmm. That's amazing. How difficult was this to do?
That one in particular wasn't actually that difficult to build, and the reason why I say that was because it was a second MIDI to CV circuit I tried.
Okay.
It was something I never really thought was possible, because I'd looked into a few MIDI to CV circuits and tried to work out how I could implement that. And quite a lot of the circuits that I saw were quite complicated because we were starting to use a lot of digital chips and things like that. So then I kind of bumped into somebody's circuit who was using the Arduino. And again, the Arduino was not something I was quite aware of at the time, but it had actually been around for a few years.
Right.
So the first circuit I tried was just a basic MIDI to CV circuit, and it kind of gave me about maybe 6 octaves very badly out of tune. But to me, that was an achievement. The fact that I've actually got that to work.
You got it to work, yeah.
Okay, I could, because I could sequence this in time with a MIDI clock. So that was all good. So that's when I decided to build the second circuit.
There it is. Look at that. That's awesome. Yeah.
So that was the second circuit that I decided to build. And again, this was something I discovered by Googling MIDI to CV out of curiosity, seeing what would come up. And somebody had a circuit, and the plus side to this one was the fact that it had MIDI. It was MIDI to CV and gate. It also has a clock pulse, and it also transmits velocity, and it also transmits pitch bends. So I was like, wow,
that's
bonus.
That's awesome. Yeah, and there you go. You have it right there, and we see it works. Oh, that's amazing! I thought that's a really cool thing. That's an awesome achievement, I think. Because I've always wondered how do you do that? Because there's mods that you can get for some of the old synthesizers where they'll just add MIDI onto it, but they're not using an Arduino. Do you know anything about how they're doing that and some of those modifications?
No, not really, because I mean, when I was looking into, one of the things that I bumped into quite regularly when I first got into synthesizers was Kenton retrofits, and I never quite understood how they worked. And then I started learning that Kenton retrofit kits pretty much is adding a digital MIDI, controllable circuit to these old, synthesizers. Like, when the Jupiter 8 was released, it never had MIDI,
right.
SH101, even things like 303s. There's lots of Kenton MIDI retrofit boxes and kits that came out that was allowed. And I looked into those circuits, or tried to look for those circuits as well, and wasn't too successful in finding anything that actually really made sense, because like I said, this was all fresh stuff to me.
Right.
So there's lots of terms which was used and things I was reading, and I was kind of like, I can't get my head around that,
Yeah,
so
but
I'll try some.
Your solution is ingenious, because the Arduino platform is, there's a lot of information on that out there, and that's awesome that it works. So that's something that as a synth designer, especially someone new, that's a great way to solve that problem.
It was, like I said, it was to me it was quite a big achievement, and the fact that I could get maybe 7 to 8 octaves almost pretty much bang in tune on all three of the oscillators that I have on my circuit designs was a real bonus.
So when you go about getting these components, where do you go to source these things?
Well, there's quite a few different sources that I have, actually. I mean, what it is, there's a place in the UK which literally just gone bust a few weeks ago. They're of closing down now.
No.
I haven't invested in their company, so I'm not. It's one of these things. It happens from time to time. There was a place called Maplins. So in the UK we had a place called Maplins, but also there was another place called RS Components. I'm not trying to plug anyone here, but there's a place called RS Components. And also, sometimes I used to kind of put adverts on the kind of like give. Yeah, there you go.
The website is even saying we're closed. That's a bummer.
That's right.
I can't remember the guy's name, but there's another guy on YouTube who he does teardowns in synthesizers and he'll fix them and stuff. I can't remember his name for the life of me now, but
Marcus Fuller.
Yes, that's it, Marcus. Yes. And he was always going to Maplins for stuff. Do you have any online resources though that the people might be able to, especially if they're not in the UK?
There's places like Thonk, THONK, which is another synth DIY site which I bought a few parts from. There's places like Mouser, 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 and the places like DigiKey, and
Yes, we got Thunk. Yeah, well, I'll get a list of those from you. We'll put them in the description for people who are interested in acquiring the components necessary to build some of these circuits, because I think that's a big thing. How do you, if you're interested? Well, how do I get these components? So that's cool. I didn't know Maplins is gone. That's wild. It's like out here. We had a company called Radio Shack. Now, I don't know that they sold to this degree, especially this specialized type of stuff for synthesizers, but they had a lot of components you can pick up and just buy like in small quantities as you needed, basically, in most cases, and take them home and build stuff. And they are gone now, too, pretty much. So, let's see. What kind of synths have influenced your design process for what you're working on now?
It's a bit of a combination between VSTs and analogue, some analogue mono synthesizers, and a few polyphonic synthesizers as well. I mean, for instance, I watched, when I started getting into watching YouTube channels, I started learning things about, some of these new synthesizers which were coming out. There was one particular one at the time, which was the Dominion 1, the MFB Dominion 1, which is a free oscillator mono synth. And, I used to watch the Sonic State reviews and watch how Nick Batt goes through the parameters and think, okay, that's quite not so much a fresh idea, but that's quite a idea which is actually not implemented quite typically. Maybe I could have a go at doing something like that. So there was, and things like the Mini Brute. The fact that you could have waveforms an oscillator with waveforms which you could mix rather than being hard locked. Right, I need to turn the switch from sawtooth to triangle to
Right, you've got a variable control for the waveform.
So I did the variable waveform thing with all three oscillators. So you could literally mix 9 different waveform shapes as per tone.
Right.
Is pretty much how the Matrix Brute. And the Matrix Brute, and there was another example, was quite an influential synthesizer. When that came out and seeing how that was
oh, you mean this whole thing right here?
Yeah. You see that thing behind you there? Guilty. So see things how the Matrix Brute worked and how it uses the sound, how the sound sources worked, mixing sound sources. So that was another thing that was quite influential to me. Again, which was another idea, which was I suppose you could take back to the SH-101, how it was one of the first synthesizers which had the variable mixable wave shapes. Also things like the Oberheim SEM. I really love the sound of the filter. It's got a very, very unique 12 decibel state variable filter, which the sound is to me is amazing, which is probably second. I don't know if it's second in line to the sound of the Moog ladder filter, but it's the SEM filter is definitely more than a one-trick pony, which then it influenced my idea for building because in the synthesizer I have now, I have 2 filters in series. We have the Steiner Parker clone series. Series with the SEM filter, so we got 2 filters there, and it kind of influenced me to build this little bad boy here.
Nice. So that's your filter.
So this is another filter. This is not the one I have in my main synthesizer prototype circuits. This one is a 4-pole SEM type clone. I say type, it's not exactly the same, but it's pretty much the same components, main components which give the sound characteristic. That's pretty much the same. So what it is, the SEM filter is traditionally a 2-pole state variable filter. When we say state variable, it means we can go from low pass through to notch through to high pass continuously.
Okay.
But I kind of tailored mine to be a multi-mode filter. So we can, we have the high pass, band pass, low pass, and the notch, etc. But I've chained 2 of them in series. So rather than have 2-pole, we've got 4-pole, and it really has a nice sound. I've never seen that done before. But again, that was an idea I kind of woke up one day and thought about it. Well, if that's possible, never really tried it, and then a few weeks down the line, I gave it a go and it worked. So.
Wow. So this is an SH-101 here, and this is a Behringer clone.
I like that fact that I've added the guitar.
I love that too. Yeah, the strap and the thing, because the original had that, I think.
Yeah,
the originals
back
came
to the 80s with that.
Oh yeah, it's awesome. We'll see how that all comes out. Interesting stuff happening in the synth world today with Behringer shaking everything up, but. Yeah. So one of the things that I always liked is, and this actually goes back to when I started creating music and learning about synthesis, I used Reason a lot because it had the different synth modules and you could wire them up kind of how you needed, and a virtual rack, so to speak. But one of the things I loved is on their Maelstrom synthesizer, it had 2 different filters, and you can run them in parallel or in series. That's something that I wish a lot more synthesizers had, because you have a lot more sound shaping possibilities. Like the Matrix Brute has the ability to do that. I think the Axis Virus does. Some virtual analog synths also have that. But I wish kind of every synthesizer had 2 filters that you could.
You've got that option. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So this is one of the things I kind of said to myself. I'd rather have the option to do that, where you could just you could either use one. You could have one. You could use one filter. We've got 2 different filters, 2 different sets of sound characteristics, or you can mix between the 2. Right. We've got all those options. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. It's. I love it. You have more sound shaping possibilities, and And again, like my whole thing with that was, but this was before I even had a hardware synthesizer. I was using Reason, and I'm doing all this stuff, and then I started getting some of these hardware synths, and I'm like, man, like it kind of sucks because I've only got this one filter, and you know, yeah, bit of a disappointment in some cases, but having it there to be utilized if you want, I think is really cool.
As I always say, it's better to have it than be looking for it afterwards.
Yeah.
You know?
Yep.
Yeah.
So, and in some cases, like if you go back to some of these vintage synths, like the SH101 here, it's old school. So it's gonna have, you don't buy this for its feature set. It's limited in terms of features. You buy something like this because of the sound that you get from it. And that's something else that I've noticed through my journey with sound and music and stuff is, and this is why I own a lot of different synths, is because certain synths have certain characteristics that make them good for certain applications. So, because like I try to explain to my girlfriend, she's like, "Why do you need this?" I'm like, She's like, "Don't you have a synthesizer?" I'm like, "Yeah, I have." Yeah, but see, this one sounds like this, and it does this, and you know, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why there's so many different flavors.
I'm with you, brother. I've had the same conversations. Why do you need so many keyboards?
Right.
You know? This one plays the same sounds as that. One sounds like that one. Well, you don't quite understand it. I can explain it to you.
Right.
But you know, yeah.
I mean, some of them you can get to sound like other ones. True. But the more you have, the more options available to you overall.
Yeah. Yeah. And the more you learn that, you know, every single simple, even if you was to go by one company, say for instance Moog, a Moog Prodigy doesn't sound like a Micro Moog, and Micro Moog doesn't sound like a Moog Source or a Moog Opus. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
Although they all have that ladder filter, which gives them the main character of the sound, they all sound like there's those nuances that.
It's a slight variations in some cases where it's still better to have this one. Even though this one can get close, this one still sounds better. Like I would even argue that with even some of the virtual analog stuff, like the JP8000, which was the first synth to introduce the super saw, which is very famous in trance music, I still think that thing has the best sounding super saw ever. So and
I agree with you now.
And I don't know what it is because you know it's virtual analog, but it's definitely got its own flavor.
Yeah.
Yeah, and even since like the D50 and the M1, there's something about the certain amount of granularity, and maybe it's because of the sample rates or the samples that were used, but they have their own characteristics, you know.
Yeah, that you can try and emulate it, but it's not quite there.
Yeah.
It's not quite there. You must have that. Like I said, it was one of the reasons why I kind of got into synthesizers when I, hearing Hoover sounds, and I thought I must have the Juno too because that's the only sound that produces the Hoover. And although there's a few other synthesizers that can produce a Hoover-ish sound,
right?
I kind of learned there was a unique feature about the Alpha Juno, that it had the pulse width modulation on the saw as well as the square, which actually makes that particular sound.
Okay,
it wasn't just the fact that it had this variable chorus on it. Which was all part of the characteristic of the sound. So
it's things like that, like that, and that's why when people ask me why do you need all this stuff, or that's why, because each one has its own thing about it that makes it unique.
There you go.
That I need it.
You could go out and buy lots of dogs if you own dogs.
Yeah, I got one right here. He wants to play.
Each dog does a different trick. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun though. So resources for ideas and modifications.
Yeah. So again, it's one of these things I kind of Google ideas and see if anybody's maybe done it before. There's been a few times where I've looked at certain circuits. For instance, my first modifications were the Steiner Parker circuit, where I decided to change values of the capacitor in the kind of the diode ladder and see how it sounded. And changing the actual material types, just experimenting and thinking, right, okay, seeing online, seeing some schematics of people have used different values, but they're, you know, the base circuit is the same, but everybody's circuit was slightly different. So I thought, well, okay, well, maybe I'll try and use a little piece of his, little piece of theirs, and a little piece of that person's there, and put it all together. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, Frankenstein.
Yeah.
The components. But
Do
you find that you notice that, especially after you've been doing this for a couple of years now, that you just know that you're going to get certain things from the way either a circuit is designed, or if I use this capacitor versus this one, it's going to make it sound like this. Is that information that's been accumulating in your brain?
No, it's still a surprise to me how good, you know. For instance, if I never had the idea to the Steiner Parker filter that I built was traditionally a diode ladder, and I kind of had this idea to maybe try and change it to using transistors wired in a diode configuration, which is something which was actually used in the TB303. The TB303's ladder filter is used wired transistors wired in a diode ladder, and I kind of thought, is that actually going to work with a Steiner Parker filter design? And I didn't know it would work, and I tried it, and that's where we, you know, the demo that you showed earlier on, that's how I got that very, very unique sound to it, and a very deep sound, and even adding a extra capacitor to the ladder to give it, you know, to try things. Well, I want to try and give this circuit a more steeper cutoff. I didn't think something I was going to achieve, didn't quite know how to go about doing it, so I thought, right, okay, try this, try that, and yeah, it either worked or it didn't work. And if it's not working, I want to do something to make it work. And what, you know, trying different things and surprising myself and think, right, okay, well, I'm going to try this different type of transistor. Looking on, you know, old circuit diagrams, what was the actual, you know, really getting geeky and into what the different actual types of transistors and the different, what they call the different, you know, the different values of, you know, the I can't think of the acronyms, HFE, what it stands for, and the VBE, what, you know, the different characteristics, makeup characteristics of them affect how you know, the sound of your circuit.
Right.
So it's all still, yeah, sorry, go on.
Oh, I was just gonna play a little bit of the sound demo for the SEM VCF 4-pole. This is one of your testings with the JD990. So you running the JD990 into this filter?
That's right, yeah.
So let's hear a little bit. That is smooth, dude. A little bit of resonance in there. Man, that sounds nice.
Yeah, like I said, the SEM filter is a really, really nice sounding filter. Especially, it really shines in polyphonic synthesizers. Although that's not true polyphony, it's kind of an idea of what it would sound like. You know, it was to give a flavour of what it could potentially sound like if it was a, you know, poly. Because obviously, for polyphonic articulation, you need 12. Say, for instance, you had a 12-voice synth. Each one of those oscillators, 12 oscillators, need a separate VCF and VCA.
Oh, okay.
As opposed to, whereas a paraphonic synthesizer would use, say, for instance, like the sub 37.
Sub 37, yeah.
Although you can play two different keys, you're not triggering two different envelopes or two different filters. It's all sharing one filter.
Right. I think it's duophonic on that one. Yeah. I think the Matrix Brute is paraphonic.
Yeah.
But yeah, so they share one filter and an envelope, right?
Yeah. So,
and that's why polyphonic analog synthesizers are expensive, right? Because they not only do you have to, because you have to have per voice a circuit per voice for the oscillators, right?
Yeah.
And then the filter and so it can get pretty out of control. So, future plans with prototyping and your channel on YouTube here. What do we have? What can we expect to see from Adamski coming up?
Expect the unexpected, really. Like I said, I'm always trying different things. I suppose, in the general sense, there's going to be more synthesizer experimental circuits, tutorials, and, me sharing things that I've done and tried, and trying to give inspiration to you guys to have a go at what I've done, and maybe trying different things apart from synthesizers. Like I shouldn't say recently, not a few months down the line, I've tried guitar effects. Like I've tried something called the Zombie Chorus. There's a demo on my channel where I did a zombie chorus. Also things like maybe trying distortions. I've had a go at trying to Boss DS, which is quite a famous distortion pedal, the Boss DS1. And trying things like making maybe EQs and compressors. You never know.
Oh man,
it's one of the things I'm quite interested in.
I think that's awesome. Do you have plans, like, so for your synth that you've been building, you have plans to try and get that and out to sell, even in limited quantity? I hope so. I buy one. I've been waiting.
My first customer. I'm just gonna sign your document, and you'll sign your manual right now. It's one of these things. When I first got into synthesizer building, I was kind of very much focused on just the circuits, just the sound. Right. Well, in actual fact, there's a lot of. I didn't realise there was so much that goes into it. Planning the actual things like the controls, the layout.
Right.
I mean, if I show you here, if I can get this in the camera, this was a mock-up that I tried of the of building a panel for it, a housing.
Holy crap!
If we can see that.
Yeah.
So not sure I can quite get that in focus there.
It's bigger. It's bigger than you are almost.
It is bigger than me. So yeah.
Wow. So that was your front panel mock-up for the synth, and it has a name, right? What's it called?
Yeah, that's right. It was called the Ad-Vantage 03. So it was kind of a bit of a wordplay on ads, myself being Adam, and Vantage and Vintage, because quite a few people have commented on how it has a slight sort of more vintage sound to it compared to some modern synthesizers, etc. And the 03 came from the fact that it has 3 oscillators. So the Advantage 03M was the name. And I suppose I kind of thought to myself, well, if I make another synthesizer eventually, and maybe it's only a slightly cut down version, it could be the 02, maybe just a 2 oscillator version. Yeah. Even even the 03S, which could be a stereo version.
Okay. Yeah. So I'm sold. Sign me up. See, so here's the thing. So, I mean, you got into this just kind of curious about it, but now you have essentially a fully working synthesizer with a lot of features, and it sounds really good. And I think it would be a shame if you didn't try and make some of these and sell them. Like I said, you got synth guys like me. I love this kind of thing, and the fact that it's something that you did yourself gives it even more of a clout to it, I guess. Like it makes me even more drawn in and interested in it. So, and I'd be interested in helping back that if you had a Kickstarter or anything like that you needed. Just let me know. I definitely pitch to help support your efforts there.
I truly appreciate that.
Yeah,
brilliant.
I think what you're doing is brilliant. It's amazing, and it's pretty wild. Again, like you just started kind of just messing around. Now you've got something that potentially you could produce and sell to.
Yeah, very true.
Synth nerds like me who live far away from you. So.
Yeah, well, it's one of these things, if it does get to the point where I can produce, PCBs, I could maybe sell it as a kit where you buy the kit, the PCB, and you go and get the components and put the thing together. Yeah, kind
of like the Re 303, right? That's what they do.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, and that was something that I had been interested in maybe doing that. I haven't decided yet. I think you and I kind of talked about that project a little bit, and it may be dependent on whether or not you can get everything you need to put it all together.
Yeah, because I kind of had a look into that myself a few years ago before I bought the one of the clones of the 303, which is Zoxbox, which is the XOXbox.
Right.
As, you know, some people may know it as.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of, I toyed with that for a few months, and I liked the sound of it, but there was something about it that wasn't quite right and didn't quite. So I thought, trying to get hold of a RE 303, which is supposed to be more a genuine copy. I mean, it's not actually supposed to be. It's actually supposed to be like a replica, not a clone. It's actually a replica. It's just the old parts being resourced, like things, very important things like the VCA, which is a BA 662 chip, which is one of these exclusive Roland chips, which is again characteristic to the sound.
And let me pull up the RE 303 site. This is an XOXbox. Anyone interested? I thought about getting one of these before Roland released the TB3 in the Aero line, and I ended up picking up the TB3 and then of course the TB03 in the boutique because they sound pretty good. But I would love to get either an original or try and build one like from this RE 303 thing. So if you did something like that, that would be perfectly fine. I would see if I could maybe build it. This was something I actually wanted to ask you. Did you have any situations where you pretty much exploded stuff in your face while you were testing it out?
Yeah, I had an incident where
the magic smoke, as they call it.
Yeah, there was an incident where I was experimenting with a board, and I got the polarities wrong. I was kind of still using batteries at this time. I first started off by using batteries, 2 9-volt batteries, to get the, a lot of synthesizer op-amp circuits, they run on a bipolar supply. So you have a plus voltage, a negative voltage, and a ground earth, 0 volts. So I had a op-amp in the wrong way round, and I didn't actually realize the importance that you can't actually get away with that for a few seconds. You put that in wrong, you're going to get some damage and you're going to know about it. I remember smelling some smoke and then hearing a crack, and the op-amp literally split in half, popped open.
Oh
and,
my
God. It really made me jump and made my heart beat just a little bit faster.
Oh crap! Yeah, boom! Does it sound like a firecracker going off on your desk?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Oh
yeah.
man! Grab the fire extinguisher. It didn't start a fire though, did it? It just smelled bad.
No, but it was definitely was a lesson to be learned, and it kind of
put it in the right way.
Yeah. Yeah. Always read the data sheet.
Right.
Always
Make sure you got your
sheet.
orientation correct and the pins hooked up in the right spot.
So yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty wild. Oh man, exploding components. Yeah, but here's the RE 303 site. This is their web shop, and there was so you can buy, I think, the main bits like the motherboard and a couple of the main shit. Here's that BA662 chip you were referring to. This is a clone. I think they have to sell this separate from the kit for some reason or something weird like that. Yeah. I'm not sure if you can actually literally buy the whole thing. I think it kind of adds up. It makes the price go up as you sort of add more bits on. Yeah. You can buy the main parts, and then you have to sort of. But I guess other parts like the resistors and transistors, you can kind of pretty much source. Like recently, when I was having a go with my Steiner Parker filter, I was looking into the 303 filter and trying to find out exactly what the transistors were which were used in there, to see if the actual transistors, the characteristics of the transistors, contributed to the sound. Mm-hmm. And I found that they were actually still available, which I think was something like this. They call them C945 NPN, negative, positive, negative transistors. But again, it's one of these things. Is how much are you willing to get your hands dirty with it? Well, I mean, if I did this, I would want it to be as good, just like what you were saying, as good as I can make it. So I would actually probably employ some of your expertise and some other folks to make sure I got the right kind of components for that. So if they still make those original transistors that were in the original 303, that would be the way I'd go. I don't care if it costs a fortune. In some cases, you almost wonder, though, should I just buy one? But those things are getting pretty old. A lot of them they only made like 20,000 units originally, because it was a failed product initially, which is pretty wild.
It was.
And now they tout it as this thing that made techno happen, which it did basically, but it's not, people just kind of bought these because they were cheap and started messing around with them, and there you have this iconic sound.
Yeah,
I think the 303 is one of my favorite synths of all time.
Yeah, because you bought if I'm not correct, did you buy the TB03, the boutique TB03? Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've seen on your channel.
Yeah, I did a little demo with that and the TR09, doing a little old like acidy house kind of little number that I just kind of made real quick the day I got it. So I don't know. There's something about that synthesizer. Some people hate it, some people love it. It's one of those things you either love it or hate it, but I love it. Yeah. All right, man. Well, I think I don't have any other questions on here. Oh, we do need to talk about this, which is Adam's release on Beatport. It's called the Threshold for Peace. I'll put a link in the description for this, guys. Check it out. It's pretty good. And also I have a link to Adamski's SoundCloud. You can go and peruse his various tracks that he has listed up on here, which there's quite a few.
Yeah, there's a lot of clips on there. It's kind of like just and lots of things I do. A lot of tracks I give away for free. I get to the point where I just kind of think, well, I'm not going to bother trying to get this released, or it's been so long I've done the track that it's not really relevant or quite current as it was back then.
Right.
So I've just released it as a free download. So there's always little bits and pieces popping up there and ideas, and I'm always open to collaborations with people as well. So if you want to get in contact,
let's do it, man.
Hit me up and down.
Let's do a collab, me and you.
For real.
I think that'd be fun. So guys, check out Adam's YouTube channel. He's close to 1,000 subscribers. It'd be great if you can get there as soon as possible, since all the YouTube crap. And Adam's always producing content. It's really helpful and really great. And I really appreciate you coming on here and
thank you.
And chatting with me today, Adam.
Yeah, it's been great, man. It's been great. Yeah. Like I said, I'm quite chuffed and honoured that you've picked me up and reached out to me and put me on the show. Yeah. Like I said, I never when I first started with YouTube, I never had the intention of actually making a channel that was going to be as grow as much as it has.
Yeah.
And I'm really grateful to everyone who's supported that channel. All the subscribers that I've picked up and all the knowledgeable people. And
well, you're an inspiration to me. You've got a lot of very helpful tutorial videos on there. I feel like if I do decide to start kind of going that direction and trying to make some stuff myself, you're going to be one of my biggest resources, at least to start to get me going in the right direction. So I think that you add a lot of value there, and I wanted to try and give you another platform to let people know about you, man. And you're doing great things over there. I really think it's awesome, and like I said, I hope you make this Advantage 03 a real thing, man. Let's make it a real thing, and you got my support.
Yeah, thanks, man. Like I said, it's one that as the channel's been growing, I've been seriously thinking in my head, come on, man, push this thing. Like I said, I've got into doing the schematics, compiling schematics. Mm-hmm. My little Bible here,
right?
Schematics, and and next stage is trying to design PCB. I can get one successfully done at some point soon. Who knows what's coming next?
Well, stay tuned to Adam's channel for that. Hopefully.
Exactly.
Fingers crossed.
What your audio interface is.
2 fingers.
Plugging in your Advantage 03 at some point.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah. Oh, that'd be so cool, man. To have it go from where it started to where it could end up, I think that's cool. All right, Adam, well, I'll let you go for today. Thank you very much again for coming on. And but guys, check out Adam's channel. Check out his other resources. We've got links to the videos that we utilized in the interview here today in the description, so be sure to check those out if you're interested. This is Marshall. I'll be talking to you guys soon. Thank you very much.
Peace.